Brooklyn Independent Television.
Hey, it's a big
But
borough.
will Brooklyn really go for
Why
it?
don't we just agree to disagree?
Yeah, that's really gonna fly in
Well, that's a
Brooklyn.
good question.
No. Listen.
That's exactly the point I wanted to make.
Political power in Congress is based around population. Bigger states, like California and Texas, are rewarded with more seats than smaller states, like Rhode Island and Delaware. Since our population is constantly changing, people move, have babies, die, the Constitution requires that a census be held every 10 years to count the people of each state. Census numbers are used in the process of reapportionment to determine how many of the 435 congressional seats each state gets. As states grow in population, they get more seats, and they take those seats from states that have grown less quickly. After each reapportionment, every state must alter the boundaries of their congressional districts to account for these changes. This is called redistricting. The United States is the only advanced democracy in the world where politicians directly participate in the districting process. Why does this matter? You live in a district, many districts actually, congressional, state senate, assembly, city council, school. Everyone in America lives in districts. All districts are bounded by lines. The way district lines are drawn can determine who represents you for decades at a time.
There is an image held the world over of an American democracy that is robust, vibrant, open to change, and subject to the will of the voter. This image is an unfortunate illusion. Gerrymandering is America's best kept secret.
That was the opening sequence of the feature documentary Gerrymandering, directed by Jeff Reichert. It's a documentary that delves into the history and practice of redrawing the lines of voting districts and proves that in this instance, truth is stranger than fiction when it comes to political drama. But why should you be concerned about some imaginary lines on a map? Right now on Intersect, we'll figure that. I'm happy to have Esmeralda Simmons, the founder and executive director of the Center for Law and Social Justice at Medgaravich College of the City University of New York, and Jerry Vadamala, staff attorney of the Democracy Program at the Asian American Legal Defense and Education Fund. Thank you both for being here.
Delighted.
Thanks for having us.
So a moment ago, that clip said that America is the only Western, advanced sort of democracy where the people who are still in power as electeds get to redraw the districts for those who get to vote for them. So that seems like we're starting from a broken place to begin with. So how can we expect good results if our jump-off point is already sort of skewed?
Well, we can't.
Yeah.
We can't, and we haven't seen good results from elected officials drawing their own maps for many, many years. And as a matter of fact, that's one of the reasons why New York City, parts of New York City, 3 counties of New York City is covered by the Voting Rights Act. And the federal government acts as a reviewer, actually a previewer, to make sure that some of the bad things that come out of gerrymandering that particularly affect voters of color don't actually get to happen.
So when you say Voting Rights Acts, we think of the bad old days in the South and down there where, oh, they're so country and they don't understand and it's horrible and people are racist. But New York, the promised land, we're up here as far north as you can get almost, and we're still a voting rights state.
Well, New York State was one of the first voting rights states along with the Deep South.
Right.
And it really says something about power and people's unwillingness to share power. And it says something about racism up south, as we call it. And as Jerry will also explain, it's not just limited to the traditional black-white pantheon. No, we've moved beyond black-white. We've got brown, we've got Asians, all of whom are still being discriminated against. And these lines that have been proposed are no exception to the continuing story of discrimination.
So it's often said, and I guess often proven, that in politics they're strange bedfellows. So Jerry, explain to me the coalition that has acquiesced between your organization, Esmeralda's, and a few others as well.
Sure, absolutely. ALDEF, the Asian American Legal Defense and Education Fund, we've worked with Esmeralda and the Center for Law and Social Justice, Latino Justice PearlDef, and National Institute for Latino Policy to come up with a proposal that LATFOR can look to see, what a map would look like that protects all of the minority groups in New York City, and that's called the Unity Map. The Unity Map was proposed by all of our groups. Beyond what the four organizations that proposed the Unity Map, we all worked within other coalitions within the Asian American community, the Latino community, African American community. ALDEF is part of a coalition of Asian American community groups called Accord, and we also work with other groups outside of that coalition. LATFOR has received comments from us and from the other minority groups across New York City to help them in this process. So we felt that we can't advocate only for the Asian American community without regard to the other federally protected minority groups in New York City. So we've worked as one group and produced one map in working towards the same goal.
So we heard you reference LATFOR, and you can't read an article without seeing LATFOR in big, bold letters. What is a LATFOR?
We're trying to figure that out. It's technically, don't try to follow this, folks. Technically, the name for LATFOR is the New York State Legislative Task Force on Demographic Research and Reapportionment. Does not fit the acronym. Right. And what is LATFOR? LATFOR is a administrative arm of the New York State Legislature. And it's been charged by the New York State Legislature to assist them and to staff their redistricting task. And why does the New York State Legislature have a redistricting task? Because the New York State Constitution charges the New York State Legislature with drawing its own lines. So see, that's how deep it goes. We have a state constitution.
In the Constitution.
Yeah, the state constitution telling the legislature that they should draw their own lines. And then it becomes out as a piece of legislation, and then the governor gets to sign it or veto it.
Why wouldn't these people who are so ingrained in it be the best ones to make the map?
Well, the truth of it is, they do know the communities, but you're actually asking folks whose political survival depends on how their district is drawn to look outside of their own interests to a broader interest. That's never happened. Besides the fact that even if it were just individual legislators drawing, we might have a better chance. But what actually happens is that the two major parties in New York State, the Democratic Party and the Republican Party, split control of LATFOR, even down to the staff. They might even split it down to pencils, as far as we know. And each of them has a side, a staff side, other side of the aisle, and they then draw the maps, not even for particular elected officials, not for particular senators or assembly persons.
The wrong party.
They do it strictly on what's going to benefit the party, and then sometimes legislators are told to suck it up.
Yeah. Well, Jerry, the new maps were released by this agency, and people aren't happy.
Yeah, and there's a lot to not be happy about, but we did find a few things that we thought were that we were happy with, especially on the assembly side. Assembly District 49, that's proposed by LATFOR, keeps the communities of Sunset Park and Bensonhurst together as we had asked for in the Unity Map. So we're very pleased with that. Assembly District 47 keeps the remaining area of Bensonhurst whole, something else we asked for in the Unity Map, so we're very happy about that. Right. It's a very short list, unfortunately, about what we're happy about. What we're unhappy about is, really more on the Senate side, especially in Brooklyn. Right. Very little of what we asked for was actually, put forth in the Senate plan. Senate District 22 cuts all across from Bay Ridge all the way to Sheepshead Bay, meandering through Brooklyn. It's very hard to determine why it was drawn that way. Also, Sunset Park. Sunset Park is contained in a district with Central Brooklyn that has, they have nothing to do with each other, and a very odd-looking shape. And that just increases criticism and increases cynicism from the community and groups like us that are trying to put forth what's best for the community and are hoping that LATFOR is open to hearing our suggestions. But on the Senate side, it's very disappointing.
Bringing it back down to the Brooklyn level, specifically in the 19th and 20th, they're looping in areas that are really
well. We actually
weird.
call the 20th the cow with the long tail with a hammer at the end of it. It goes from North Crown Heights, all the way across, swings around Greenwood Cemetery, and then goes to the western part of Brooklyn to pick up parts of Sunset Park and Borough Park. And what's the relationship there? I did a little mapping of it myself. In addition to our unity maps, I did a transportation map. There is no direct transportation between these two communities. I mean, there's not a train, there's not a bus. So what's tying it together? There's some people that say that they're trying to tie together two small communities of traditional conservative Jewish people, that's fine if they want to do that, but they can't do that at the expense of the larger black communities that are protected by the Voting Rights Act.
So one of the questions that all of this begs from these sort of amorphous blobs that are like Rorschach tests, you saw a skinny cow with a long tail, and it makes no sense looking at it in that way. You just see these crazy forms. But one of the questions that comes up again and again is, aren't we past this? Is it really the still where we have to divide into our tribes and we have to have a black voting block and an Asian American voting block and a Jewish voting block? Here in Brooklyn, there's so many people from all over. Obama's in the White House. Aren't we past all of those things? It's like the bad old days of New York politics, or anywhere for that matter.
I think the short answer is no.
So it's still important. It's
still very important. And, for the Asian American community, there's 212 New York State representatives, and count the House and the Senate. Only one of them is Asian American. That's Grace Meng. And she's from the only Asian American majority district in the entire state legislature. And I'm not saying one necessarily correlates with the other, but you do have to look at those things.
Right.
And we put forth a community of interest survey to LATFOR that demonstrates that there's more than just race that unites these people in certain communities all throughout Brooklyn and Queens and the rest of New York City. So we're asking that communities be kept together, and one of the characteristics of those communities is race.
And we have to be honest. Let's be honest. This isn't just about can we all get along. This is about sharing power. And unfortunately, many people who are actually saying we are beyond this, we're post-racial, can't we just look and see what we can do together, are the same ones that are trying to hold on to power for themselves or increase their power. And it's at the expense of communities that have traditionally been discriminated against in New York State. That's why there's this hypersensitivity about it. I find it very disheartening to hear people talking about getting along on voting rights issues, but when we talk about police brutality issues, we talk about economic development, nobody's talking about that. But when it comes to power, political power, we're all supposed to surrender our power and say, well, we trust these good guys or these women to do the best thing for us. History has not shown that. It's not an individual thing. It's about let communities decide who's best to represent them. And we have the capacity to do that. And it doesn't always come out that a black community will elect a black person. It doesn't always come out that a Latino community will elect a Latino. They're going to elect the best person that comes forth and will represent their interests.
And if I just jump in here, when that district was drawn in Flushing to be the first ever Asian American majority assembly district, it did not elect an Asian American at first. Right. It was Grodenchik was elected in a few cycles before Jimmy Meng was elected. And what we tried to do here with the unity map was not maximize the minority populations in each district. We tried to equalize. We want to equalize our voting strength to be the same as other people in New York City. And right now, that's not the case.
And I guess it respects that no one race is a monolith in a voting block, just by that illustration to say, just because you group this district together and we all happen to be of the same racial persuasion, we're not just going to put that person in because they look like we look like.
That's right. And it just gives that community an opportunity to elect one candidate of their choice. Right now, Asian American community is divided into numerous assembly districts all over New York City. Richmond Hill, Queens, 6 assembly districts. Elmhurst, 5 assembly districts.
Like a pizza pie, divided up.
How could that community, have effective representation? And the answer is it can't, and it doesn't.
So that begs the question, why isn't everyone mad as hell? Where is the outrage? This is one of those sleepy kind of subjects that doesn't rile people up. If you go, and I do go out, I stand on the corner with a microphone in my hand, harassing people, trying to beat an opinion out of them. It's my favorite thing. It's my favorite part of the job, I admit. But if I go out there and I say, tell me what you think about gay marriage. What about parking meter regulate? What about alternate street parking? Everybody has an opinion. You talk about schools. If I talk about redistricting, I have to give a primer before people can answer. And then they say, oh, that sounds kind of weird. But it's not sexy.
That's right.
It's not sexy to some, and then it's like there are redistricting people that I can only call fanatics.
Yeah.
You should take your mic and stand in front of one of these hearing sites that LATFOR is having around the city.
Yeah.
And you will see people with signs, screaming and yelling. Yeah. Sometimes people have to be removed from the audience. I mean, there is passion. Yeah. So once a community really gets that their political power is at stake, they can truly get riled up and will come out. And I want to also alert everyone that we're doing the state redistricting now. New York City councils are going to be redistricting seats next year, and this is going to be mild compared to what you're going to see with those seats, because there's going to be many, many open seats due to term limits. Yeah. But there's one other thing I would like to say. There are people who are riled up about the product that LATFOR has come out with, but there's also many, many people and many good government groups that are tremendously upset about the farce that this process has actually been. The process has been dragged out, stalled. They haven't even drawn congressional lines, and the congressional primary is going to be in June.
Right.
So we're looking at either deliberate non-action or inaction or incompetence.
To that end, we have Martin DeLon here in Brooklyn, who is one of the leads on a lawsuit that's seeking to stop this process from going forward with the LATFOR recommendations. What other sort of legal avenues are there to put a halt to this process?
Well, I think we're trying to keep the process, keep it going forward.
Well, not to stop the process,
but
what
we
to
had,
stop these bad maps.
ALDEF, as long as I know, with CLSJ, we had intervened in a lawsuit asking the courts to take over the process, because at that time, LATFOR had not released prisoner data, which they were required to under law, and they had not moved forward on producing these maps. The ultimate beneficiaries of this whole process being crunched and squeezed and having a lack of hearings on the congressional are the incumbents. Incumbents then will have a smaller field of challengers who have the ability to realize what district they're in, and then have the ability to go out and obtain petition and obtain signatures and campaign. They're the ones at a disadvantage, and the incumbents are advantaged by this.
So there was a New York uprising fronted by Ed Koch, who was one of these organizations acting independently that got out there and got the signatures of the elected.
The pledge.
And they pledged that they would be open and transparent and go for an independent sort of redistricting thing. But now they're all enemies of reform, as they've been characterized, because the pledge, they must have had their fingers crossed behind their back, because here we are now, and it's the same.
Well, most of the folks have reneged on that pledge. And the pledge was that instead of LATFOR drawing it and the fox being over the chicken coop, drawing their own, picking their own chickens, I might say, that there would be an independent commission established in New York State. The major problem with that I've already alluded to. This is a state constitutional issue, and there hasn't been any change in the state constitution. So unless the legislature gets a change in the state constitution, there isn't going to be an independent official body, though the legislature could pass off their responsibility to an independent commission. None of this has happened. I never expected it to happen, though I hoped that it would happen. But I don't want also to let everyone think that there is such a thing as a truly independent commission. Think about it. Somebody has to appoint those members. Yeah. And I've served on quote-unquote independent commission for New York City, and I didn't find it to be that independent. But I have to admit, a change is due. Yeah. This is really not the way to do redistricting in New York State. I've been doing this type of work for 30 years. I've never seen such a botched up, dragged out, and basically self-serving process as I'm seeing this time around. And Senator Martin DeLon, who is on the LAT 4, who was appointed, has been one of the sole voices of protest within the body, talking about what they're not doing. They've even actually admitted that they're not even going to have a hearing on congressional lines. I mean, and now they're blaming the court. I mean, I think that's irresponsible. They had all the time to do what they had to do, and they didn't do it. And now they should be held responsible for that. I hope the people, the citizens, and the residents of the state of New York are not going to be the ones to ultimately suffer. But I do want to add one other point. No matter what LAT 4 has done in the past, redistricting has always wound up in the courts. So I don't think it's going to be any different this time around. The only real question is whether the court's going to push forward and draw its own lines or tell the legislature to get its act together.
Is the governor going to stop this? Is he going to veto? Do you think?
I mean, your guess is as good as mine. I mean, from what we're hearing, it sounds like he's not pleased with the lines, as a lot of New Yorkers are not pleased with it. But we had always said, not necessarily, we're not happy with the process, but we really want to see what the lines look like. And LAT 4 is supposed to, after the second round of hearings, go back and take our comments into consideration and revise the maps. And we really want to take a look at those lines to see, I might be foolishly optimistic, but we might not want the governor to veto the lines if we feel our communities are protected.
But that is a step that's further down because they now have to review and take into consideration things like the unity map after releasing their sort of version, and maybe we'll meet somewhere in the middle. Is the hope?
I doubt it, sir. I truly doubt. They had the unity map before they put their lines out. They know, and they were beating down our doors trying to get us to submit suggestions. We did a full-blown map of the New York City area, state legislature, Assembly, Senate, and Congress, and they still came out with these horrible lines. I think there'll be some tinkering around the edges, but I think that, particularly with the Senate map, but I think that what we've seen is going to be, unfortunately, very much what we're going to be stuck with until a court gets hold of it. If a court gets hold of it, or the Justice Department, it goes to the Justice Department, there will be some pushback, and they will have to make some changes. So we are eventually going to see some changes, but I don't really have faith that LAT 4 is going to self-govern itself, discipline itself.
So what can we be doing on the grassroots, citizen level, now that, now like you are now informed, so there's no excuse. You've heard about it, so now you're prodded into action. So what should that action be? I know you're holding an event soon.
Yes, thank you. If you want more information about this, and I know by now that you're chopping at the bit. Medgar Evers College next Thursday in the evening is having a forum on it. I will be presenting along with another expert in this area, and we'll be explaining everything that you want to know about redistricting. That's what's going on now and what we foresee for the New York City Council. That's going to be 6 to 8 p.m. at Medgar Evers College. Feel free to come out. Obviously, there's no admission. It's open to the public. Bring your ideas, bring your comments. And in addition, LAT 4 is accepting comments from the public. Go to their website. I usually tell people to go to latfor.gov. It's not the real site, but when you put that in, it'll get you there. I mean, if I gave you the real name, you'd be writing for the next 5 minutes, okay? So it'll get you there. And then you can see the maps for your area. You can get outraged like we are. You can find out about where the hearings are going to be, and you can submit your comments online to LAT 4. If you can't find them in LAT 4, you obviously can call my office at 718-804-8893.
All right, and I have written down some people who are in your coalition, aside from the folks at Medgar Evers who are at the Center for Law and Social Justice and the Asian American Legal Education and Defense Fund. Latino Justice, as well as the National Institute for Latino Policy, are involved. So, Jerry, who is not at the table there who should be? What groups are you saying come on down, or just the people? It doesn't necessarily have to be a group. We have a call now, but who else should be at the table so we can move this forward?
Well, I'll tell you, I think we're happy with our coalition.
Yeah.
We feel that we protected the minority groups that are listed under the Federal Voting Rights Act. We would like to see the public involved. People from the communities that are most affected by these maps come out to the public hearings. The next one is Tuesday at Queensborough Hall at 3 o'clock. We have a lot of people from the community we're trying to get out to testify and give their comments to LAT4 so that they can hear us loud and clear and take those comments back with them when they're making the revisions. We had a tremendous amount of support for our efforts at the first round in Queens. It was speaker after speaker after speaker, and I think that did make an impact. Like I said, there were some things that we were happy about in LAT4's first proposal. It was a mixed bag, but there were some things that I think they heard us with, and I think it's worth the effort to go out there, take some time, let them know, how you feel about these maps, and as a citizen, you should be involved. These are your maps, and this ultimately translates into power, and that power ultimately translates into resources into your community, or lack of them, depending on how the lines are drawn.
So is there a body, a state, a legislature somewhere that's doing it right that we could Google ourselves or look to as a model to say, this does make a little bit more sense? Is there a lead that New York should be following, you think?
Well, I'll tell you, it's kind of surprising. But because everybody remembers the butterfly ballots, but Florida actually had an online draw your own map and submit it that was funded by the government.
Just for citizens,
yes,
like you could draw your map
right.
as you saw the people who were related to your community and concerns.
The data was all there. It was very easy. LAT4 has done nothing that even approaches that. We were fighting just to get hearings.
Yeah.
So that's one thing that's definitely happened. There are several other states, everyone thinks about California, where they've had independent commissions, some mixed bags, I'll put it like that.
Yeah.
And a lot of money was spent on that process. But at least they could say that people were not solely acting in their own interest. Right. So technologically, in terms of public policy, there could be some major changes in New York. And the real question is there a political desire to do so?
Well, we're asking people to act outside of their self-interests, right?
That's right.
That's the heart of the matter.
That's right. And I think the question, you sort of alluded to at the start of this program was, how was it able to go on, this way for so long?
Yeah.
I think the answer is, people just didn't know. I mean, I think a lot of people just assumed that the state was divided into like a grid with like equal squares, and that's just not the case. And I think, politicians and incumbents from both parties had benefited for years and years and years on the fact that the public was just not aware. This cycle, I think the public has really become, apprised of what the situation is and has been outraged. Unfortunately, that hasn't translated into real change, but at least, I think the public has been engaged and has been following the process and holding LAT4 a little bit more accountable.
And we're all waiting to see what the governor does. He did sign the pledge.
Well, our ignorance has been their bliss, as you said
absolutely
a moment ago, Jerry. Well, that's all the time we have for today. I'd like to thank my guest, Esmeralda Simmons of the Center for Law and Social Justice at Medgar Evers College, and Jerry Vadamala, staff attorney from the Asian American Legal Defense and Education Fund. So now you've been told, we gave you a few websites that'll still be on our website as well. But take some action. We'll see you next time. Bye now.
Watch this and other Brooklyn Independent Television episodes online at breakartsmedia.org/BIT.